awesome. This is, I guess this is my first talk, and I'm the first talk for OnlyFeet Con, which is really exciting. Yeah, never done this before, but I'm looking forward to it. Hope you guys find some sort of benefit from it. Let's just get on with it. So I'm Tasty Boy, John. I am an IT security analyst with a governance risk compliance focus at the minute. I'm shifting over to ops soon as an incident responder starting next month, so I've got a new job for that. I've been in InfoSec, I think it is about 4 years. And I went through a traditional route of getting to this industry. I went to university and did BSc in computer science and went on to do cybersecurity, and then ended up my first job as an analyst. I mean, you know, that's the traditional route, but nowadays there's so many different avenues and so many different ways you can get into cybersecurity. I think it's a fantastic field to get into. And just to mention, I mean, this community is fantastic to get people sort of deciding to transition between careers to cybersecurity. So that's just a brief overview as to who I am. And on to the talk, which is why you're all here, obviously. Oh, and also that's my dog. I thought I'd put a picture of the dog just to make things nicer to watch. His name's Dennis. Right. So my talk is on information security assurance, and the reason I've decided to do a talk on this is based on my experiences as an analyst, based on the frustrations I've faced, the experiences I've had. So I'll be looking at the challenges that analysts face when it comes to vetting third-party suppliers. So one of the most common routes of compromise is through third parties, getting into larger organizations through third parties if they've not been vetted properly and they have closer integrations with these third parties. It is quite a common route to traverse. And so one of the biggest aspects is to ensure you assess vendors that come into your organization and that do business with your organization. Poor vendor management, you know, can cause all sorts of problems, which can lead to larger issues later down the line. So the way I see it, there are two sides specifically to this. I'll be focusing more on the first aspect. So, for instance, you're responsible for assessing and reviewing security posture of a new vendor that's being introduced into the business, and you're looking for assurance to ensure that they're taking security seriously. So you want to make sure that this supplier holds little risks. And where was I? Right, yeah. So what I'll be focusing on the first aspect. So you're reviewing suppliers that come in and their responses to your information gathering exercises. The other side of it is you are showcasing and producing evidence to indicate that you do have a strong security posture. Usually in the case that you'd have a client or a new bid that you're going for, and you need to prove to them that you do take security seriously. But I'll be focusing on the first aspect. So I'll just quickly go over the methods in which an organization might assess a vendor. The main method of assessing a vendor is through what's called a standard information gathering exercise. It's usually a spreadsheet. So one of my biggest tools is using Microsoft Excel. It's fantastic. And essentially it's just gathering information, answering questions on a number of control areas, ranging from security policy, asset management, network security, and it covers, you can choose what aspects it covers. So that's the basic, and usually it can be a yes or no. Do you ensure you have appropriate access controls? Do you have an access control policy? It could be very simple as that, or it could be more detailed, asking for examples or exact methodologies as to how they would harden a system. The step up from that would be to request for evidence or certifications to provide assurance. In this case, it would be maybe looking for a SOC 2 report or an ISO 27001 certificate. That provides assurance that the organization is aligned to those frameworks, and that usually is a good tell as to whether they take security seriously, because they are audited and investigated by a governing body, a regulatory body, like for example with ISO. And lastly, the highest level, which I've not experienced, is a site visit where you would head up to the vendor's business. You would go through the information gathering, you would go through the evidence, and you would do a proper thorough inspection, interviewing employees on site. And this will all be dictated by the data and the interaction you'll be having with the vendor. So if the vendor will be in contact with very sensitive data, then you're more likely to want to address that risk by doing a more thorough check. So that goes through the methods. I've got this screenshot here. The main method of gathering that information is through questionnaires, and the least common is on-site assessments. Then you've got 4% that organizations don't carry out assessments. Which I found this report only recently. I put a link to it at the end of the slides. But I think that's quite interesting in itself, is how organizations gather this information. But that brings the challenges, which is one of the main things that I want to talk about. This is an example of what these spreadsheets look like. As you can see, they're quite hefty and usually quite dull. So I have to look through these every day, and yeah, but it's a necessary evil, and it's an important aspect of assessing security for third parties. So the challenges that I wanted to raise were when you're carrying out these assessments, they're only a point-in-time reflection of the security posture. They're not, things could change in an organization so quickly that the next day they introduce a new VPN solution that you might find is completely vulnerable to a number of exploits and has not been configured properly. And the day before, they answered one of your questionnaires and they said, oh yeah, we do this, and this. So that's something that you need to be aware of. The next one is the idea that they send out these questionnaires and they expect organizations of varying sizes to be able to respond in the same manner using a one-size-fits-all assessment, and that can prove challenging for smaller organizations who might not have the resource or the need to produce reports or even apply for a SOC 2 report. So that can be quite problematic. And the next bit is determining whether the information and the questions that you're asking is actually relevant to the assessment. So there might be some questions in the questionnaire that you're sending out that might not be entirely applicable to the context of getting this vendor on board. And lastly is the business interest bias. So if the business has already made the decision to onboard a specific vendor, and your role is to carry out the due diligence, if they've decided, yeah, we're going to be using this product, the due diligence kind of just becomes a simple tick box exercise and purely there for compliance, which can be quite problematic from an analyst point of view, because it's like, well, what's the point of me doing this work? And then lastly, the vendors can easily refuse. Big organizations don't necessarily have to fill out these questionnaires. and therefore you'd have to make a judgment or an assessment based on the fact that they've not provided you any of the information you were after. A lot of the times they do provide you some sort of fact sheets or something similar, and you can make an assessment based on that. But then in most cases, you probably have to accept that risk. So those were the challenges that I identified in my experience to be quite troublesome when dealing with third parties. To give you an idea, a lot of the issues come down to resource restraints, because it's quite like I said, it's quite a hefty task to go through all these spreadsheets and all the questions, and they're all asking the same thing. So it's quite monotonous. So there's got to be a better way, and sadly for you guys and for this talk, I don't actually have a solution. There is no straightforward solution to this. I don't think it's something that I think a lot of organizations struggle with, and it comes down to the way the organization handles these things. One of the questions that came out of this when I was looking into it was, what metrics can we actually rely on that provide us with a good idea that the organization takes security seriously? You can take security ratings, you can take certificates, but then how do you know that they're not going to be breached? And that's a difficult question to answer. So yeah, basically I did this talk without actually answering the initial question I put forward, but I thought it was a good challenge to discuss it and see if anyone else had similar experiences with this. Yeah, that's me done. Thanks. Thank you for indulging me. My first talk.
Awesome, John. Thank you so much. We see we got some questions in chat, so we're gonna collect them for a second and pass them over to you real quick.
How do you deal with vendors that do not deliver all your requested documentation? So I was a bit flustered, and I sort of ran through the talk. But ultimately that decision doesn't, if you're just a measly analyst, that decision doesn't fall to yourself, I don't think. Obviously we dealt with someone higher up. So it entirely depends on whether, like I said earlier, if they want to get that vendor in. And if that's the case, then it'll just be an accepted risk put on the risk register, and God forbid it's forgotten about. You can normally, from my experience, I would arrange a call and just go through and just sort of probe them a bit more and ask for a bit more information. But it's entirely dependent on how important the vendor is as well. So that needs to be built into the process, determining the context of the vendor. I hope that answers your question. Bill? Meg. Cybersec Meg. He's a good dog. He's not a puppy, he's 4 years old. But yeah, he acts like a puppy. So funnily enough, there are, again, this because I just ran through the presentation, but funnily enough, there are solutions out there that actually do this, and they automate this whole process for you. They do all that, and I'm not going to go into it in this talk because I think some of you might know my opinion on some of these services, but they offer like a rating, and it's completely arbitrary because they're pulling this information from somewhere on the net, and then they label a company with a rating of A, B, C, D, or E, or F, and the company might not know that this exists. I mean, they are notified, but if someone relies heavily on this tool that provides them a rating, they might simply avoid that business because this arbitrary scoring system rated them an F or something, which is ridiculous. So all I'd say to that is probably do have a process separate to it. Talking about EU security scorecard. Yes, I mean, you can tell a lot from the state of the documents and the quality of the documents that they provide you. you can get a good idea as to whether they're actually, if they're truthful in what they say. I think one of the statistics I put up was that only 34% vendor responses, they don't believe it. So a lot of the time we're just listening to people say, yeah, we do this, and this, and then it's never really the case. So that's also a challenge in itself. But yeah, no, I appreciate all the questions and the feedback. It's been really, really good.
Yeah, good job, John. Thank you, even with all of the out as we go, and thank you for being the first speaker.
I hope I set the bar. Yeah, no, it's been great. Thank you very much.
You did good with all the difficulties we're having. So thank you. It was great.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna switch over.
I'm gonna dip off now.